Now, another question was, in your opinion, if direct and SMSF investors knew that they were not covered for fraud by compensation scheme, is it fair and just and reasonable that these investors would trust that APRA and ASIC would perform their responsibilities with competence, diligence and act promptly and decisively when they need to? But what if they fail to do so, like what's happened? Where does the investor stand, and when does the regulatory oversight falls? What needs to happen from here, Paul?
First of all, I don't buy this whole issue that you people didn't know. You people knew better what the social contract meant. You might have known the detail, you might have known the actual specifics, but in this democracy we're not expected to as citizens. But we have a good working knowledge as Australians about what we're entitled to. And you were entitled to protection. I don't buy this, that the SMFs had no protection. You had protection. Government was going to be the provider of last resort in failure. That was my understanding of the superannuation system that was introduced way back then. That was your understanding. They've tried to make out that you're somehow ignorant. You didn't understand Section 23. You didn't understand the loophole. Hey, there's no loophole in the system. The loophole's been created by Short. There was never a loophole in the system. Stephen Jones used the phrase, who in their right mind? Well, I'd say to Stephen, what politician in their right mind believes that they can sell a scheme to the electors of this country where they say, oh, by the way, if you choose to use initiative, if you choose to take control of your investment and your future, you're on your own. Who in their right mind as a politician could think they could get away with that one?
All of the comments, which I was quite surprised at, where I heard negative comments about the VOF victims stating that they put all their eggs in one basket with superannuation. Well, I can honestly say to you, well, so's this little black duck. I'm a single mum of 3 children, and I've spoken, of course, many years ago to a financial advisor, and he said, oh, Kelly, gosh, you've got superannuation everywhere. Consolidate it, get it all into one. So we had a looked at what was, at the time, the best thing for myself, my superannuation and my future, and I did that. Now, does that make me wrong? Does that make it wrong that I didn't want to pay excessive administration fees, with various superannuation companies? Well, what's your opinion on Mr Jones's statements pertaining to
Greg
that?
Petty's arrived. Come on, Greg. Greg's an independent councillor. Come up to the front so people know you're here. Greg Petty, independent councillor for Ward 1. Can I just answer it perhaps in a long way? I apologise for that, but this really needs to be nailed as well. This is another lie that Short perpetrated against your interest when you were victims. I don't know a lower act. I'm a member of Parliament and a minister. Okay, why were people going into self-managed funds? At the moment, in the superannuation system, 80% of the $1.3 trillion is held by 20 of the biggest superannuation funds, who hold 50%, and 30% is in self-managed funds. Self-managed funds are the biggest component in terms of a fund in the system. But they don't have representation and they don't have a voice. We're going to try and change that in this election. Why would you be in a superannuation fund? Well, Stephen Jones says, who in their right mind? Well, I'll tell you why. And with respect, if I can use the example of Linda and Colin Atkins, who are here today. Colin was in Australian Super. Australian Super is the biggest superannuation fund in Australia. $40 billion in one fund. Bill Shorten was a director of Australian Super for 9 years before he went into Parliament. It is dominated by the Australian Workers' Union, which is the dominant faction in the Australian Labor Party. Bear that in mind. We're here today to talk about the politics of this at last. Let's talk about the politics of it all. Okay. Why would someone like Colin, who's a rational, prudent man, who's worked hard all his life with his wife, why would they go into a self-managed fund? Stephen Jones says, not in your right mind. Okay, Stephen, you reckon Colin's not in his right mind? The Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority produces this. It does one good thing, I'd say, and that's that. This is produced in 2012. It gives you the rates of return of superannuation funds in this country. Interesting reading. Up until the global financial crisis of 2007, when, by the way, most of you went into self-managed funds, the rate of return of that fund over a 12-year period was 9% rate of return every year. Quite reasonable. Since the global financial crisis, its rate of return is 0.4%. Does not even cover inflation. So what are the Colin and Linda Atkins of this world supposed to do, according to Stephen Jones? They're supposed to sit there whilst their savings are dissipating over the years. Whilst, by the way, parliamentarians have defined benefit schemes. Their superannuation doesn't dissipate. Defined benefit scheme is where you get on your retirement what the scheme is obliged to pay you. There's very few of those schemes left in Australia, but they've got one. But the Colin and Linda Atkins of this world don't have one. It's estimated that now you need at least $400,000 at the age of 65 to be able to live comfortably past the age of 72. And I'd suggest that most people in Australian super who are working in the steel industry in Port Kembla will not make the 400,000. So, what did they do? They did what we expect Australians to do. They said, we're going to do something about this ourselves. Which Stephen Jones says, you're out of your mind.